to When Burnout Becomes Reality, a podcast that combines lived experience with the scientific knowledge of burnout to help listeners prevent, recover, and grow from burnout. My name is Shannon Swales, a human and clinical psychologist with both lived experience and scientific knowledge and skills in burnout. It is my hope that the values of authenticity, compassion, wisdom, and community shine through in each and every episode of the pod. Episodes that share my own and others' lived experiences of burnout, and interviews expert guests to help listeners build awareness and hope to prevent, recover, and grow from burnout. The views, opinions, tips, and the like expressed by myself or my guests are not a replacement of personalised therapy. Just like I have done for myself and many of my guests, I encourage those of you that are suffering to seek professional help. Hi there. So I have decided to do an episode on my own. I haven't done one for some time, and that butt in the background, by the way, is my doggy, my youngest, Mr. T, Toby. So he's just trying to find a place to chill, hopefully for now. Anyway, it's Saturday morning on the 9th of March here in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, and you probably can hear the birds in the background. Got my front door open just to allow some cool breeze in. And yeah, I'm just sitting here on this Saturday morning and thought this was a great opportunity to touch base, because what inspired me to do this episode is a couple of things. One, I had a couple of high school students from America reach out to me. They're doing a project on burnout and mental health providers, and they wanted to interview me. So they sent me a heap of questions to answer, and I thought I'll do an episode on this for the podcast. But also the other second influence was that I had been thinking for a while to come back on the pod, because I think the last time I tuned in was when I was returning to work, before I made the decision to return back into working as a clinical psychologist, which was, God, back in October 2023. And no, hang on, 2022. So we're like 18 months on. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity just to touch base with that as well. I felt like there might be some crossover with that. So bear with me as I share my experiences and answer these questions for these lovely high school students who are looking into this really important area and have asked for my knowledge and wisdom from my working with people with burnout, but also my own experience. So hopefully I'll be able to answer those questions for them best way. So yeah, I'm going to start with their questions, and I'll probably then share a bit more about where things are at for me after answering their questions. So bear with me. First question, what prompted you to go into this kind of work? A very long story short, and I tend to go the long story in a roundabout way, so bear with me. But a long story short, I was curious about human behavior. I was in my early 20s working in hospitality, unsure about what I wanted to do with my life, feeling that I needed to know what the hell I was doing, sort of feeling the pressure for that externally, but internally. And yeah, I was talking to a customer where I worked, and they were studying psychology, and it just really sounded interesting. And I had a chat with myself and talked to some loved ones as well, who encouraged me to step into studies, which was highly anxiety provoking for me for various reasons that I may share, but that, yeah, I made that step into it. And as I did my undergrad in a Bachelor of Science major in psychology, and I was doing that via distant education, I just really stayed interested and was really loving what I was learning. I think at some point I thought I was deciding to be a psychologist because I wanted to help people. But what I later come to learn was I was just going with the flow because that was what you were meant to say. That wasn't really why I was doing it. That didn't come to a lot later, as to, besides being really interested and curious about human behavior, as to why I actually became a psychologist. That came much later. after I burnt out and did the work in terms of therapy, and realizing once I recovered from my burnout and had enough space to actually really connect with what I enjoyed, what I enjoy, or what I find meaningful and purposeful in my work as a psychologist. So very different, what prompted me to what prompts me now. And actually, just on that, what prompts me now is that I love to learn. So psychology gives me that opportunity, and I make opportunity in my work life now to learn about human behavior, to keep that up. So at the moment, like, I'm learning about neurodivergency, ADHD and autism and the other neurodivergencies, because I'm really interested in it. And the clients I work with are questioning this or do have neurodivergency. So, but I'm interested in it. So I love that continual learning aspect of it. I also like sharing the wisdom that I learn to others, because we don't always, not everyone has this wisdom. And with wisdom, with learning, we can learn about ourselves and what we might need, or how we can help others or help ourselves. So I like imparting this wisdom that I gain to my clients, to the public, to help them look after themselves. And I'm also driven by compassion. There's still not a lot of compassion in the space of mental health. There is a lot more than it used to be. So I like to be part of that providing of compassion to others who are experiencing difficulties within their mental health. So I'm driven by that. And I'm also driven by being authentic. I lead with the authenticity of my own experience of mental health struggles across my years. And I really encourage and hopefully provide the space in which people can be authentically themselves. I mean, we're not our mental health conditions, but we're so much more than that, in helping them connect with that. So authenticity, because when we're authentic to ourselves, the world opens up, in the possibilities. So anyway, I'm prompted and driven very differently to what I was before. So anyway, second question, what do you believe is the main cause of burnout with the mental health providers, and why? I think one of the big thing with mental health providers, like this industry itself, and I'm thinking about, just to be transparent, I'm thinking about psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health nurses, social workers, counselors, coaches, there's a variety of health professionals, and other non-professional roles like caregivers, paid or unpaid, volunteers on crisis lines, anyone who's working with people or supporting people who are experiencing mental health conditions. So whoever those providers are, what do you believe is the main cause of burnout? I think within this profession, the main cause is like they're continually exposed to trauma in the sense of other people's trauma. But you're a human, a mental health provider is a human present in that trauma, trying to support and help that person with their stresses, their anxiety, their depression, their whatever's going on, their trauma, that we can then become traumatized. And burnout, often in the mental health field, tends to be also like a compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is, well, there's controversy as to how it's completely defined, but it's the type of burnout where we've been providing that compassionate space, that empathy, that sympathy, the trying to care for that well-being for such a long time, and often in a space where we're under-resourced and the workload is huge, that we become fatigued and in some cases even traumatized. So the secondary traumatic stress, the vicarious trauma, where we can experience PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. So we're not exposed to the trauma itself. Sometimes we can be, as mental health professionals, like worked with and talked to social workers and people where they have experienced trauma, where their life or their well-being, their psychological well-being has been directly affected. But it can be vicariously through hearing other people's trauma. But this continual exposure because you're human, eventually can create that burnout, that compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma in that individual. And as I mentioned there, coupled with an under-resourced system, which often mental health is, often in a lot of governments, it's kind of like it's getting better, but it's still severely under-resourced. So you're a mental health professional doing the best you can, but often you don't have the systems you can rely on to help you do that work, because often that client in front of you needs a lot more than just what you can provide. So that continual under-resource can certainly leave you exposed to burnout. And the pressures, there's so much more need, especially due to COVID, that there's a lot more need out of there, and a lot more awareness of people noticing that they need that help from mental health professionals, but we don't have enough resources and systems in place to help that. And I think the other factor is that often the mental health providers, us as people, are people who want to help, who we feel this sense of justice and moral and ethical and compassionate calling. We want to care, but they're not being able to meet that level of care that that person needs. And that leads us to feel, well, shit. But, like there's just that gap. And in that gap, we feel a lot of feels. And often we don't have the space, time, knowledge, or resources to give back to ourselves, to care for us in that space. So yeah, that's my answer to that question. So the third question is, how do the heavy psychological impacts of mental health provider lead to burnout? Well, I think I kind of answered that one in a way. It leads to burnout, but I suppose I can go a little bit deeper. And if we think about human beings and what we understand about how our humanness operates. And what I mean by that is and I think some of us know this already out there, that we have a threat system, a threat protect system that is activated quite automatically. And it's a system that has been there to help us survive as a species. So it's our fight, flight, freeze response. So in the situation in which we're facing a threat, let's imagine a lion's coming at us. We don't have to think. Our body goes into this fight, flee, or freeze mode to protect ourselves from that lion. To draw, so adrenaline, cortisol floods into our body to help our muscles activate and to get the systems we need online to act in that situation. The problem in our modern day living, most of us are not facing lions anymore, but the lions are now our perceived threats or the actual threats, like constantly facing this situation of trying to help people, but not having the external and internal resources to meet that demand. So we are constantly living in a state of threat, which we're not designed to do. That fight and flight and freeze is supposed to be an acute stress response that then, that lion goes away, we're able to fight it off, or we shoot it. God forbid, I don't like harming an animal, but, to survive. But, if we're able to get away from that threat, then, in non-modern day times, usually we would have that safety back into our community, into our, our clan, our tribe, whatever we want to call it, our family, able to rest and digest and just have that time and to meet other demands or other aspects of our life, and not be around that threat. But these days, with our modern day living, but also our ability to think, we could be doing those things, but our mind is still in that state of threat. Like, oh God, I've got work tomorrow and I've got to see this client and this client. So biologically, that those systems, when they're that system of threat protect constantly being tapped, can certainly and does contribute to burnout. Burnout is a chronic stress syndrome. So it's that pervasive, consistent tapping, as I like to call it, of that threat system without the balance of having that time away from that threat, whether mentally or physically. So there's an imbalance, that creates that burnout. The next questions, which kind of leads in from answering the other questions, what are the long-term mental and physical effects of burnout? And I also want to talk about social and spiritual effects here as well, because it's not just the mental and physical. But just talking about some of them, with this constant state of threat that we're in, there's also the risk of things like cardiovascular disease. I'm talking about heart attacks, strokes here. There's risk of getting sick a lot. And I used to get sick quite a bit, because your immune functioning is compromised when we're stressed. Things like inflammation, diseases, which depression has been linked to that. I won't go into that, but depression is another risk. What else? Gastrointestinal issues, irritable bowel. I know it sounds gross, but I certainly had lots of issues in that area, in my burnout experience. And that didn't really, it took the longest to recover, and still is in recovery, really. A lot of my gastro issues. My immune system seems to be a bit better, but that is still an issue. But yeah, there's lots of effects, mentally, we're exposure to depressive disorders, we're exposure to post-traumatic stress disorder, where, it's really can affect our psyche, and it can even musculoskeletal conditions. So I remember having lots of issues in that area, and funny enough, or interesting enough, and I was getting a lot of help from, physios and remedial masseuse. But as soon as I started, making some changes and stopping work and really focusing on connecting back to myself and doing things to help support my well-being, my musculoskeletal issues were sort of the first to disappear. But the other area, socially, the impact on our relationships, because burnout, when we're burning out, basically we don't have enough energy to give to the demands of our life, whether at work or at home. So we start to sometimes withdraw or isolate in our social life or in our relationships to give to the work if we're prioritizing work, or vice versa. And so we can see a lot of withdrawal or social disconnection from relationships in those areas or in those environments to survive, to protect us while we're in that. But that can lead to things like divorce or conflict, in those relationships. It can lead to losses in that, losses of friendships. It can lead to a lot of distress in those environments at home and at work. And then also spiritually, we can lose meaning or purpose or richness. So when I talk about spirituality, it could relate to God, and there can be a disconnection from, that higher power you have, or it can be that disconnection from ourselves and what is meaningful and important to us. So that sense of dissatisfaction, disconnection, and pleasure in life and from people and environment. So hopefully that's making sense. And I don't know if I mentioned already, but another serious one is that it can lead to death by suicide, and that is just the reality. Suicide has been linked to burnout. This is serious stuff. We weren't designed to be under this amount of pressure for this time. Something breaks, and we can break in any of those areas. And all of those things are obviously important. Our life's important. Our relationships are important. Our work is important, or working is important in making our lives work. But because of our humanness, our biology, and how we're made up, we're not meant to take that load that is put on us and integrated into us, if that makes sense. So how can we reduce and minimize burnout within the mental health providers? I kind of start from, I think it has to be a cultural shift, but we don't have power on our own to shape the culture. We do. I really believe change starts within ourselves. Like, I feel like me changing and changing how I work and communicating that others helps start to shift the culture. Because if other people hear my story and then they make that change, and then other people do, that maybe we'll see a shift in culture over time. And what I mean by shift in culture is that like, and I might be like this hustle culture and this need to have all these things, like, you know, even to work full time or to have or have two working, you know, if you parent and there's two parents in the household, that two working parents, you know, like, I mean, I know there's things like the housing prices are ridiculous now, and but you know, even needing to own your own home or buy a home, but even renting then is ridiculous too. Because I was like, it's okay to rent. I'm in my 40s and renting, but renting is astronomical too. So anyway, like I know there's a lot of complexities to this, but a shift in culture of this need for stuff and success being in having this stuff, having this, you know, great work job or whatever, working full time and six-figure income or whatever that sign of success is, or, you know, being the best lawyer or whatever it might be, or being a lawyer when you don't want to be a lawyer. Because of the, you know, maybe what you see as a prestigious job, or what success looks like, or owning that home, or having multiple homes, having a portfolio of homes, but all this pressure to keep up with, you know, so this hustle culture and still look pretty and, you know, look a certain way and be fit and healthy and have healthy children and all this jazz, you know, like, I mean, if that's what you want, then great. But I think there needs to be a cultural shift. But I feel like I'm running away from the question. But I think in the cultural and mental health providers, I think it really starts with the training. And I had this conversation with someone else, you know, a few probably months ago, and it really started opening up my perspective about what can help. And they were talking about this. I can't remember who they were. I have many conversations, which helps open up my, you know, my understanding of this area. But they were talking about that it needs to start from the beginning. And I think the culture within our training, within our universities, within the wherever we're getting that training, that from the start there's a focus on you, that you as the paramount resource, and instilling you with the knowledge and skills to take care of you in order to be able to take care of others. That, you know, in that training, that become the focus. So it might be things like learning about the risks to your mental health with doing this job, the potential risks. So you're armed with the knowledge to be aware, but then also the skills, what skills you might need or do need in order to be alert to that. So things like reflective skills, you know, being able to reflect on where you're at, but in a way that is conducive to changes and what changes, you know, that you can make to help support that. But also a system that models that too, having our workplaces and our universities modeling healthy behaviors. That I feel like at the moment it's like, okay, work comes first, study comes first, and everything's second. You need to sacrifice that. Or even your well-being, like going to gym. Like, it's, I think it's changing, but there's still, just with the load that is expected on you, that even if that's not the expectation, that's the expectation learnt, because the workload is so huge, those other areas need to be sacrificed. So we're learning to sacrifice ourselves in the early stages of our training, and we're not being equipped with the resources to resource us. So we're learning that we don't matter. So I feel that that is what needs to change. And then also in that resourcing us, and us learning about ourselves and reflecting, crafting a life from there that is conducive to well-being, and an industry that has that flexibility, or variety of ways in which to work that still supports ourselves in that industry. So having part-time positions, but having security in those part-time positions, you know, so things like sick pay, holiday pay, and being paid, you know, accordingly, to the work that you do. Yeah, there's I think it's the systemic changes in those parts of our training that need to change in order to resource our mental health providers better, so they come out with the internal resources, but have the external resources, the systems that allow you to do the work that you do, if that makes sense. As someone who does therapy specific to burnout, what steps and methods do you use to improve someone's burnout symptoms? The way that I work on the individual factors. I don't work with the system. So there's a lot of providers who in the burnout field who will work with the organizations or leaders or teams within workplaces and companies to help them build the systems that will help support the workers and help prevent burnout or help support the burnt out or whatever else mental health wise is going on from that individual. And I don't see universities doing that yet, but could also work with universities to help with that too. I work more one-on-one with the individuals. So for me, I start off by first, having a free consultation with someone to get to see if we're the right fit, because one of the most important thing is that connection between therapist and client, and that's not something, like I'm not going to be the right fit for everybody. And we may not work that out in that first consult, but enough to go, okay, I'm the right fit to continue, and them engaging in therapy with me, and that paid consult, investing in me and in themselves to resource them. And usually, to begin with, it's really getting an understanding of their burnout experience, really gathering so that wider lens about what's going on in their life, recently, but leading up to these experiences, this burnout, and how that's showing up in their life, their symptoms and the impact. Sometimes that involves some formal measurements. Other times it's a combination of that and talking, asking certain questions. But it's also going back in the history as well, because our early life experience shape our beliefs and our behaviors, and so that can provide a lot of wisdom as to why things are a struggle now for the person. So there's a lot of investigation and connecting, which is really helpful for me as the practitioner, as the therapist, but for the client in understanding why things are the way it is. And then from there, working on the things that are in their control to change, to help them improve their wellness. And that can look different to everyone. And I draw on a few main therapies that I've learned over the time to help people with that. And that's things like mindfulness-based therapies, acceptance commitment therapy, ACT, and compassion focused therapy, CFT, among some others. And these therapies help equip people with resources that are help to build resilience, help deal with the ebbs and flows of life, the stresses, the challenges. These therapies are found to help in these presentations, as well, meaning the chronic stress syndromes. ACT particularly in mindfulness-based stress reduction, but even compassion-focused therapy that looks at, and it has some particularly great evidence around trauma as well. And I find it quite useful when working with people that have quite a strong a judgmental, critical self. Or they find it very difficult to turn into and connect with themselves, to check in with what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what's going on, because it's very overwhelming, and instead a tendency to avoid. So using compassion focused therapy tools to do that. It's very person centered, because everyone's what causes and what contributes to their burnout, and other burnout related issues is different. And often I can only work on one particular area. So often it is referring out to other, or helping clients connect, if they haven't already, to other services if they need help and support. It might be like in their nutrition, or with any gastro issues, their doctor, or specialists in that area if they're needing follow-up, or psychiatrists with medication if that's needed, to help them, or other therapies that I don't provide that could help with their the trauma they've experienced, if it gets out of my area of expertise. So yeah, hopefully that gives some insight. And a lot of it's often, I call, it's in the burnout literature, a lot of crafting, a lot of crafting new ways, both new ways of perspectives and seeing things. So like mental shifts, mind shifts, but also shifts in behavior and how one is doing things, and learning skills, resources to be able to make those shifts, as well. Things like learning how to communicate assertively, to be able to set and execute boundaries, so those behavioral shifts, but learning that skill to be able to do that. So hopefully that answers your question there, on some of the things that I do with people experiencing burnout. And what changes can be made? And sorry, I'm just checking in on time because I do need to go to yoga this morning. But what changes can be made within mental health care professionals to reduce burnout, within the mental health profession, to reduce burnout in providers? I think I've already answered that question, but maybe just looking more internally and more those, because I work with the individuals, but also at the workplace as well. There's a lot of changes that can occur to help prevent or recover from burnout. But there's things like learning good communication skills. Assertiveness communication skills is really important. Learning about boundaries and how to set them, addressing any blocks or barriers or fears around doing that, those internal stuff. Skills and strategies around dealing with our feelings, because the reality is, a lot of us avoid our feelings, or because we're just, busy, 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 we're not tending to them. Also, how to deal with our thoughts and our beliefs that come up that might limit or lead us to act in certain ways that are unhealthy, like self-sacrificing or living according to perfectionist standards. So there's changes in the way that we deal with our thoughts and our beliefs, how we choose to behave, how we deal with our feelings. Those things are really important. I often find, I'm doing work around boundaries, I'm doing work around communication skills, I'm doing work around mindfulness, being able to be present with our difficult experiences, doing work around connecting with our value systems and what's rich and meaningful, and reconnecting to those things. A lot of problem solution focus, like in terms of that crafting work. And in terms of, even though I don't work with the organization, I have awareness that there's certain changes that can happen within the workplace that can really help, like things like equipping our leaders with mental health knowledge, not them being the mental health professional, but knowledge and awareness around the burnout and things like that their employees could be at risk of receiving. And then knowing, when their team member is coming to them with struggles with keeping up with work and mental health seems to be an issue, that they have that awareness and that knowledge enough of where to then guide that person to get that help. But it's even things like, we know that onboarding, like when starting a new job, if there's known factors that, and we do know a lot about certain work types and the risks for burnout, like people working in the mental health field, is that, from the start, having in the onboarding procedures, part of that training is skilling up in that knowledge and awareness of these risks and steps to address that. And even like linking into a team leader, or it might be, debriefing or supervision to continually check in on that. We know continual measurement, continual observation is important there, both training the individual to do that, but also equipping the leaders and the debriefers and supervisors to check in on that, to, again, not do that therapy work, but to help support that individual so it doesn't get to the point where they're needing to, take time, like massive time off. And also, flexibility around being able to, where possible, we're able to do their job, that creates balance in being able to do it. So, maybe the caseload that they might be seeing, just freedom to be making changes to support that need where possible, or time off, mental health days, to, again, any sort of acute sort of stress, like maybe they've had a difficult working day, that they can have that time away. So being sufficiently resourced to be able to do those things. So that's a few sort of organizational factors that could help there too. So hopefully I've answered that question there as well. How has your work and professional experience changed the way you deal with burnout? Burnout was my teacher. It wasn't till I burnt out and decided to take that time to really learn, reconnect with self, and recover that burnout was my teacher on how to work in a way that helped prevent it. I don't think it was my work, and well, it's definitely not my work experience because I didn't have the professional work experience of burnout or compassion fatigue or vicarious trauma prior to having that all happen to me. These systems were in place when I was trained. Well, not all the systems. There's a lot of good systems that are in place that helped protect me for so long. But yeah, so burnout has been my teacher, and I suppose for me, I changed. I've since coming back into working in this field a couple of years after the burnout reaching its peak, and focusing on my recovery. I work very differently. I'm more connected with myself. I did the work to, okay, what do I need? What's going on for me? How am I feeling? What works for me, what doesn't? And so having that real compassionate space, like I don't judge myself for not being able to do certain things now or less likely to do. It's more that, okay, well, how is this affecting me? And okay, well, how do I need to change things to suit? So now I'm I'm the number one resource, and I do my best. I'm imperfectly perfect, but to check on this resource first. So that's what's different. It's like this resource comes first and foremost. And from there, I make decisions about how to do things in my work and life space to help prevent burnout from happening again. So certain choices I made, which may not be choices that other people make because we're all very different. Choices I've made is that I used to think and I used to work that in order to mitigate stress, I needed to just work on one thing. So for me, it was individual therapy, working one-on-one with clients with the odd group therapy, but I didn't add too much variety to my job. I now know that certainly contributed to my burnout. I now work with a smaller caseload. I only see 2 clients a day rather than 6 clients a day, 5 days a week, rather than I used to do 4 days a week, but I see 2 clients a day, 5 days a week. So 10 sessions rather than my usual 24 back then. And that's only one part of my work. The other part of my work is doing workshops in the community. So, sharing my wisdom with others and helping in that way. I do the podcast, and I get to have these conversations and learn and share in that way. And I write, which is a creative outlet for me, and to share again my wisdom in that way. But I love to I love to write. So my book, when burnout my book, Nothing Left to Give, a psychologist's path back from burnout, that was my story. Sharing that and creating that was challenging but really rewarding. And my blog, Lessons from a Burnt Out Psychologist, I love contributing to that on a monthly basis. So I have a variety of things that fulfill different aspects and interest areas. But yeah, I work from me, not from others and what they need anymore. So that's how burnout has shaped the way I work. And when I work with people experiencing burnout, and often I see that disconnection from themselves, it's helping them connect back to themselves and have those skills and resources to do that, and then helping them to make decisions that work for them in their life, and not just work but in life, because one influences the other. Burnout starts in is a work-related stressor condition, but it comes from, our caregiving role can be something we're doing at home. It can be our parental role. It can be we're a caregiver for a sick loved one or a child with chronic conditions that we, so it's burnout, can happen anywhere, but helping craft a life or working within within that space of our humanness, so hopefully that answers that question. So yeah, that is the questions that these lovely two high school students have. So hopefully I've answered those with them, and I'll be sharing that with them as well as you guys. But now I'm just going to press pause and come back to you with sharing a bit of insight as to where things are at for me these days, because it has been, I think the last time I shared was maybe episode 12 on the podcast, and we're now at 30 at the moment, at the date of this recording, and probably by the time this goes live it might be 32. But it has been a long time since I've shared, so I'll come back and share that with you. Hey everyone. So I said I'd be back. It's actually a day since I recorded the first part of this episode. It's now Sunday, March the 10th. But I just didn't feel up to doing the rest of it yesterday, and feel in that space today. Now the background's a little bit different, and I know the sun's a little bit annoying. I'm trying to block it a little bit, but hopefully it's not too distracting. One of the things that I always say is sort of imperfectly perfect human, and even the environment sometimes is the same. One day I'll have my own studio for the podcast, and I can have all the flashy things, but for now this is authentically my space, and authentically me as well. But I promised that I wanted to, in addition to answering those questions by the high school students about mental health providers and burnout, which was really, really great to go through. And I hope you got something out of that part of the episode. But I also wanted to take this opportunity to share a little bit about this mental health provider, me. Since going back into work, how things are going in terms of my mental health and that prevention of burnout, and continuing to nurture my wellness. So I wanted to, share a bit of an update on that. And in hope, my thoughts are always with, and I know this, that when we hear other people's stories of mental health and the struggles, but also the triumphs and everything in between, it can really inspire and empower others. And that's what we need out there. I know in my own journey, hearing other people's stories has helped inspire me. It may be elements of it, it may be all of it, maybe none of it sometimes, but I often just get inspired by people sharing their real stuff, that everything. That often gets shut behind closed doors. And if we want to change mental health in this world, if we want to change anything, we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it, even if it's hard to talk about. So that's why I'm here and doing that, in hope that it helps others. I also find it's a great opportunity for me, because we know with wellness that one of the things that helps us be well is to reflect. And so this is really a good part of my well-being and wellness as well. So to reflect on this. And I actually haven't done any prep except for writing down a few questions just to guide me. So it's all off the cuff. So hopefully I won't ramble too much, but that is me as well. So you'll just have to put up with it. For those who haven't heard my story before, I'm not going to go into it here, like in terms of, before, what's today, March the 10th, 2024. Of course, there may be some relevance that I might go back. But please, when burnout becomes reality, I actually started this way back when I was burnt out. So in June 2021, which was a few months after I actually got to a point of my burnout where I was no longer able to work, that I started this podcast. And I started it because I wanted to connect with other people. I wanted to hear their stories. It was helping me, and it seemed to be helping them. And so why not have a conversation and record it? And so I had some willing people where we recorded these conversations, and such a healing process. So in episode 1, I actually shared mine. So it was very much about what was going on at that time. And I then got back on in the 6th episode, so about 6 months later after that, and shared where I was at then. And then again in episode 12, June 2022, I shared again. And then the last time I shared was in May 2023, when I was returning back to my work as a psych, like some 2 years after burning out to the point of no longer being able to work in there. So my story has been captured there, but also captured in the journals that I kept during that time that I turned into a book called Nothing Left to Give, A Psychologist's Path Back from Burnout, which you can buy. Just Google it. It's on Amazon and it's on other places. But yeah, so you can find out my story if you're curious after today. And I really do encourage people to tap into people's stories, because we learn so much through people's stories. I'm not saying my way or my experience is the same as everybody else's, because it's not. Everyone's experience is unique, and at the same time, there's some crossovers, and just hearing that other people are going through this or have gone through this can be so empowering, and so hopeful. And we all need some hope when we're in those dark areas. So that's why I put my stuff out there. So feel free to grab hold of mine or somebody else's. Doesn't matter. So many people sharing out there. So yes. But hey, it may not be your cup of tea to read other people's stories, and you're rather a book that gives you all the how-tos, and that's okay too. I should say my memoir, Nothing Left to Give, has some how-tos in it as well. So I've tried to cater for both. But hey, let's get into, so it's March 10th, 2024. So it is 2 years and a little bit to the day, 2 years and probably, 2 weeks since I went to work one day and didn't come back to work the next day, pretty much, in terms of the work I was doing as a psychologist in private practice, working with clients one-on-one, helping them with a variety of mental health issues, trauma, depression, anxiety, lots of things. That so it's really, in the scheme of things, not that long ago, and of course the battle with my mental health had been going on for some time. It was a slow burn that culminated in that day. But yeah, I'm not going to go into those details because I've captured them before. But just to recap, it's been 2 years. And I would say that where I'm at now is well, and I haven't been for a long time. I haven't been burnt out. I wouldn't say I'm burnt out. It doesn't mean that my body in some ways is still recovering, but that it's not something that impacts my functioning anymore, and hasn't for some time. And I feel like there is more growth and who I am and how I do things now in my life and work is very different, and that's what I want to share with you today. So there's a little bit of a recap. So let me just take a sip. So one of the things I did want to talk about today and reflect on is, what are the habits that keep me well? So I mentioned there that I feel like I'm in that growth period, that I've recovered, that I'm really focusing on just prevention. But I like to, rather than preventing, I like to think of it growing. Keeps me focused forward rather than sort of looking back and trying to stop something from happening. Looking back is helpful, and there's a little bit of looking back, but looking forward with the knowledge and wisdom of the past coming with me. But yeah, what are the habits that keep me well? Okay, as I said, I'm doing this off the cuff, so give me a second. One of the biggest ones, and I really feel like it's hit home of late, just with some conversations and reading up, and just staying connected with this field of burnout, and that the biggest habit that keeps me well is being connected to me. And what I mean by that, and I actually saw this, I think it was on social media this morning, they said self-connected rather than self-care. I was like, yeah. And this is the work that I do with other people, and I think I mentioned it earlier in the first part of the recording of this episode, if you heard it, is that fundamentally I'm first and foremost the resource that I need to take care of. Is with working with people, or just anything in life, it doesn't matter what you do, I think, but if you're in a caregiving role, it's even more important. And so any parents out there, but like any human being, we need to be resourced well enough to do what we do, especially if there's a lot demanded of us. And I think as humans, there is a lot demanded of us in this world. So, but as caregivers, there is a lot. So yeah, the biggest habit for me is staying connected with myself. Now, how do I do that? There's a lot of things that I've learnt over the years that help me do that and do that well. One of them is definitely and what helped me get back to being connected with myself, because I was so disconnected. That was a big part of my burnout and why I fatigued, was I just everybody else above myself. I just didn't have anything left to give to myself, because all energy, even if I wanted to, even if I wanted to pay attention, all my time, all my mental space, emotional space, physical space went to others. So yeah, now it goes to me. So the biggest thing that helped me start to turn inwards and connect with myself was my journaling. And in that journaling, it was checking in with, how am I feeling? What's going on in my mind? What's going on in my body? What's going on in terms of my environment and the things that might be drawing my attention in a negative or even in a positive way. So there was a lot of it was daily. I think it was pretty regular, whether it was just mentally doing it or actually, writing in my journal, or sometimes talking in my journal, or sometimes I'd be doing this with my husband, who got pretty good back then in allowing me just to talk, and express what I was feeling. But I very much used that framework. What am I feeling? What's going on in my mind? What's going on in my body? What's going on in my environment? Even like, what am I doing? What's my actions? And being able to do this reflective practice was also supported by being mindful. Mindfulness is something that I've been practicing for some time personally, but then also as a psychologist as well, helping my clients. Mindfulness has been really useful to teach me how to be with myself and with the world in a healthy way. One of the biggest things mindfulness teaches us, which I didn't have before, which is being able to deal with because often I saw the world and saw myself through my thoughts, and often my thoughts were quite critical and judgmental and quite catastrophic, or quite fueled by my emotions. So when I thought I was connecting with myself, when I wasn't mindful, it was more I was connecting to my perception of myself rather than what is. So mindfulness has really allowed me to, over time, as I developed that practice, to be curious about my experience. So when I'm doing that reflection practice, I'm really curious. What am I feeling? And what's my mind doing? Oh God, yes, it's going off in that worry. Everything's going to be doom and gloom thing, or it's going into that uber critical shit again, so really observing curiously rather than judgmentally my actual experience. And mindfulness also helped me in a way. Actually, no, it wasn't mindfulness, but I think it was a combination of learning how to be compassionate towards myself, and also learning some tools from a therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, where we look at aligning our actions towards ourselves, others, in the world with our values. So learning about compassion and learning about values helped me to be present with my difficult feelings and thoughts and sensations, which were rife back then when I was really burnt out, lots of horrible feelings that were very hard to be with. Having compassion and practicing compassion for myself, and practicing aligning my actions to my values, which which was pretty much being compassionate towards myself, was a value I wanted to cultivate more. That helped me be with those difficult experiences, as well as all my other tools on being able to ground myself, like through my breath or through going out in nature or talking to a supportive friend. So being able to deal with what was showing up. So I suppose what I'm saying, so stepping back, self-connectedness was a huge habit and still is a habit today that keeps me well, that I really worked on because I had lost my connection with myself. But it has required of me bringing in and actually sometimes upskilling the practices of mindfulness, of compassion for self. And I had to do a lot of work around that because I was quite critical. I slipped back into quite a critical relationship with myself, and so did a lot of work around that, around giving and allowing compassion to myself. So I suppose that habit required some other habits. So yeah, that would be a big one, and it's one that I keep up today. And I've actually, my mind, I pick up on myself slipping back into some unhealthy habits, or losing some healthy habits, because the thing is, you need to keep these up, like to stay well. It can't be, it's almost like, when we lose weight, and we do all the things that help us lose weight, but then we do that for a certain amount of period, and then just go back to normal, not exercising, just eating whatever, and then we put it back on. The same thing, with our health and well-being. These practices that we learn to get us well are things that we need to keep up in our world to keep us well. We can't go back to what we were doing. So anyway, I feel like I've lost it, but self-connectedness, requires a lot of other habits to keep up. And yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like even today, I have gone back to the diary, keeping the journaling and reflecting regularly, because I noticed that I was losing touch a little bit again with myself. Like I do that a lot more automatically now in my mind, but I just felt like I really needed to create that space and time to sit down and do it. Which brings me to another big habit that is keeping me well. And this is something that I really, as I set back into my role as a clinical psychologist as well, again, I set up my working life to be one that is more aligned with what is of value, what lights me up, what gives me joy. Before, my habit was I did what I thought I should do, or what a psychologist should do, or what everybody else does. Again, I was living through my mind of what I'd learned or seen was the status quo. I wasn't attuned to and connected to myself. And in this healing time, when I had space to start to explore that, which was about 18 months after I had completely burnt out, I didn't even have the space to think about this, didn't want to, wasn't going to come back. But I was ready to give space to, and I was able to connect back to what brought me joy. So I've crafted a work life that is based on things that I enjoy. Mostly, there has been a few little sacrifices just because, well, one has to still put food on the table. But generally being able to craft, and I use that word craft, a working life that is more aligned with what brings me joy, what brings me pleasure, what brings me balance, or more likely to bring me balance. And the funny thing is, and this is what's so interesting, my mind would tell me, back when I was working the way I was working pre-burnout, that led me to burnout, that what will keep me less stressed is just doing the one-on work, just having one area of work. So I just work in private practice, do individual sessions. No. In fact, that contributed to my burnout, seeing 5 to 6 clients a day, 4 days a week, and then all this paperwork and report writing on the Friday, which I thought would make me, would help balance things a bit. And so it did. It's still client work. You're still living the stresses and traumas and the anxieties that as you're writing out these reports. So anyway, it wasn't healthy for me. So now I only see 2 clients a day, 5 days a week, and I work in a particular niche area, burnout. And then do that work. But now I run groups as well, support groups. I do workshops. I got podcasts. I write for a blog. I do this whole variety of things. And my brain in the past thought and believed that would stress me out. It doesn't. I actually thrive on variety. Now, somebody else, that may not be the case. The thing is, you check in with yourself. And when I really tuned in with me, I love variety. Oh, fireworks. I don't know how that happened, but hey, we've got fireworks. I think it's like when I went like that. Anyway, so yeah, like I have aligned, I suppose the biggest habit is I've crafted my work life to be aligned to my needs and my needs and my desires and my pleasures as best as I can. Nothing's perfect, is always imperfectly perfect. But I'm having me in mind, even doing some of the work that doesn't always, spark joy in me, that I know I have that balance. I have those things that in my work life that bring me joy. So, and I have my compassionate and mindful self and my regular check-in to see how I'm going as well. So that's another big habit of mine as well. And I'm always continuing to reflect on that too, because what's working for me now may not work in the future. So always open to reflecting and having that time in myself to work that out. Another big habit, which I'm still working on, it's not doing too well lately, but I'm getting there, is my boundaries. And I should give myself a bit of credit. It's a hell of a lot better than it used to be. But my boundaries between my work life and my life, non-work life. And I've noticed that I need transitional periods in between my work times, like something that sort of just notes, okay, it's now we're finished. Not just the time, but doing something to break it up. And I found like I'm someone who needs a lot more physical movement to help sort of, make that change. And also things like, so for example, when I finish my day around 5 o'clock, sometimes 5:30, sometimes 4:30, just depends, that I take my dogs for a walk. My husband works from home now as well, so we both go off and walk the dog together. And I really cherish that time. I allow my values to help guide me in those actions too, and to be really mindful and present with them, because I enjoy the time connecting with my husband and us having a chat about our day, or just being outside with our dogs, who are always happy to go for a walk. So very much that values is around that family time and connecting. And that happens straight away once I finish. And that physical movement, that walking out in nature, also helps me process the day emotionally, without having to talk it out, just feel it out, in terms of that walking and just looking around in nature, looking at my dogs, checking in with my husband, how his day was, having a laugh. All those things just help that day to be left there. So that's a really great transitional period. The morning is a little bit harder, but I'm working on that. But I do have my morning exercise routine, and then sort of coming home and making myself breakfast, and developing a bit of a routine there to help me not start work till around 8:30 or 9. And also to have regular breaks throughout the day as well. So I find that I need to be doing things in those breaks, or having some sort of routine. Routine works for me, that I can go to, and have it aligned with my values. So those transitional things are work in progress to help create clear boundaries. And the biggest thing is my bloody mobile phone. And because I can access work emails on there, and I could always delete that app. I haven't done that yet, because it is useful to have that app when I'm out and about, and mobile phone is my only access to that. But yeah, I'm still working on that one, but I'm getting better at not going into my work stuff. But yeah, boundaries is another one between my work and home life. And just as I mentioned, there are a few things that are helping support me there, is values and mindfulness. Having real physical routine stuff is again me tuning into myself and finding what works for me. Boundaries is definitely a habit that wasn't existing prior. But even though I had clear working times and stuff back then, I mentally didn't switch off. I mentally, because of the load, and this comes to another habit, because of the load I was carrying, I was seeing over 100 clients on my books, and I was carrying that load and that weight, and this comes to this thing, habit of creating time and space that space in my time and my schedule to process, because back then 100 clients was too much. I didn't have time to process the emotional weight. Like, I'm a human. I feel that stuff, and that doesn't mean I'm not, like I used to think that, oh, if you're a good psychologist, you're able to, be able to not take it on board and stuff like that. But no, you're a human being, and I'm actually quite a sensitive human being, and that's something that I really love about myself now, and I feel is such an asset to what I do. But it's also something that I need to protect and I need to look after, and that means not seeing too many clients, so that I can have the space in my schedule to process those sessions that might be really loading on me. And I noticed that I there are some clients in my books where I really feel it. And so what I do is I make sure that after those sessions, and usually for me, it's something physical to process that emotions. And it might be going for a walk out in nature. It might be just, sometimes I just get up and play with the dogs or something, but I need to move. For me, for emotions to pass through, it is actually sometimes just about movement for me. I don't need to process it. Sometimes there might be some processing that needs to be done. I can do that like in supervision or through my journal, through some meditation, but generally it's just movement. It just needs to pass through my body. But I've crafted my life now and my work with clients to be able to do that. So I'm more resourced to work with clients where I need to hold, and there's a lot more emotional space that needs to be held. So hopefully that makes sense there about the habits that keep me well. Well, the habits keep me well. I mean, some of the general ones, that are really important. Nutrition. I've never been great on it. I'm a person who suffered a lot of body image issues, still do occasionally. I have been through eating disorders as well, mostly binge eating, and one, I'll be real. I don't think this, hopefully some family don't know about this, but one very, very small bout of bulimia as well, but I never engaged in it. It was a very short stint, like I think a couple of weeks, and then just was it. No. So I'm very grateful that that didn't stick. But anyway, I've had a lot of issues around that, which I know a lot of women and a lot of people, individuals, do. And anyway, so nutrition's not always been something that I have had a great relationship with, but certainly, yeah, giving the nutrition that my body needs to help function. So there's that. Also exercising, movement. That's something that I'd already had in place in a habit. So it's just keeping up that habit as well. But I'm always someone that needs to be doing something that I'm interested in or I get enjoyment from. So, making sure that I'm still doing the things that interest me in terms of those areas too. So yeah, physical movement, nutrition, sleep, of course, which hasn't been so great lately. But also, with my doctor and working on there's so many, our bodies, I'm a woman in her 40s, so perimenopause is certainly, although there's the medical professionals argue whether I am or I'm not, but certainly seems to be that way, with a lot of the signs and symptoms. So that comes into it. So I'm just, doing my best to take care of my body, my mind and spirit in those ways. So yeah, I feel like I've probably rambled on enough about the habits that keep me well. I'm sure there's others, but those are the main ones. I've also, the other question that I had here, the only other one is, what have been the challenges to keeping myself well? Yeah, there has been some challenges over the last, since I last reflected. The challenges of starting my own business. Anyone out there doing their own business, it's fucking hard. It's very rewarding. It's very empowering. I love the freedom. There's so much that I love about it, but shit, it's hard. Like, and working in the way that I need to work for my health, it means sacrifices, other sacrifices, financially. I mentioned I love to travel. I think I mentioned I love to travel, and travel is something that I haven't been able to do. And I know this is, I'm a very privileged person. I realize this. I've done so much travel in my life, but adventure is so important to me, and getting out there. So that's been a challenge. But yeah, running a business has been a challenge, and you're worried if you're going to have enough money to, pay the bills. Yeah, it's been challenging in that way. I don't know how else to. It's just that sort of financial challenge because there's not that regularity of and not that, but pre to burnout, I was a sole practitioner then as well, sole trader. I didn't work for somebody, but the practice I worked in had a regular, I built up a referral pathway there too, and they had regular clients. There was never a question about, it was more about there was too much coming in. And now it's like, when is my next client coming in? So it's I'm never tempted though to go back to what I used to do, because I need that flexibility of be able to work in the way that I need to and I think that although I know there's some people that might be willing to do that, I also feel that pressure, not that they're necessarily giving any pressure, but I find it hard to negotiate the needs of others as well as my own. So working for myself in my own business works for me. Anyway, comes with its challenges. So business, finances, learning lots of, actually that hasn't been a challenge. I was going to say marketing. Marketing's been a challenge. I don't like marketing. Selling myself, getting in front of the camera, hate it. I know it's something that is helpful though for people to see me, see the real me. So I do it. But yeah, that's been a challenge as well. But other challenges are things like my relationships as well. My husband and I, without going into too much detail because of his privacy, but that we've had a tough time the last few years with me being sick, and then him going through his own burnout and his experiences, and our whole world has been turned upside down in terms of where we were going and what we were doing and where we're at now. A lot of things are on hold besides travel. We rent, we don't own our own home. There's just a lot of, it's been a challenge for our relationship, and that has been a big stress over the last year, in terms of nurturing that and making space and time to nurture that. Because, well, if you don't nurture your relationship, for anybody who, in any kind of relationship, friendships or not, you lose it. Love will take you so far, but relationships take work. But we're doing pretty well lately. And again, I think I mentioned it earlier, like, I'm so grateful that I burnt out when I did, because our relationship has been a lot more resourced when we went through some stuff in our early 30s. So there's a lot of skills that we have from those early experiences, and we went to therapy then, that we now use regularly. That's really helped us through this period, but it doesn't mean that it's been a challenge. So yeah, relationship has certainly been through a challenge. Also my physical health, your body takes a toll on your body to live in such a chronic stress state, which is burnout, for so long. So my immune system, is shit. I'm so grateful I don't suffer from a chronic autoimmune condition or anything, but I've had ongoing gastro issues, ongoing hormonal issues, ongoing sleep issues, but and just getting on top of managing those with the professionals to help support my body to heal, because that's really been the one has taken some time to heal and still is. But lucky for me, there isn't any chronic or permanent damage there. It's just a matter of continuing to support my mind, body, and spirit, so that my body can heal there as well. So yeah, physical health has been a challenge, relationship has been a challenge, starting my own business has been a challenge. And they're a challenge in the sense that they create stress, which it's normal, to experience stresses. But that, the interesting thing that those habits that I've created have been there throughout that as well, which has really helped support those times too. And I haven't, the biggest challenge too that I haven't talked about, I felt like I was missing something there, like I'm avoiding something. Maybe the biggest challenge for me was going back to working one-on-one with clients. And I think I spoke to this a bit in my Return to Work episode 21. I'm not sure because I haven't listened back to it for ages. But that's where all my anxiety was, all the trauma, because individual work is the work that I was doing prior to burning out. And I knew I was going back to working in a way that was very different, but there was still a lot of anxiety and stress with facing that. And I faced it with all those healthy habits that I was talking about. And of course, regular supervision. I connected with a lovely lady who works with health professionals who've experienced burnout and compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. So working with her and working with the group supervision program as well really helped me through that time. So supervision really helped, and connecting with psych friends as well. That's been really important to help me through that time, and just really leaning on those supports and just slowly going back into it, and using all those healthy habits to take care of my emotions through it. I feel I'm in a space where the level of the individual work that I'm doing I'm content with, and there's aspects that I really enjoy about it, and can connect with, and also the other aspects of the work that I really enjoy. But the individual work was a really difficult step to go back into. I'm being real, but it's at a point that I'm really connecting with it. I'm really enjoying it. There's still some challenging parts, especially if I'm that emotional sort of side, but I've got ways to connect and deal with that now. But yeah, that's, I suppose, being a big challenge as well. But I knew that one. It didn't surprise me. But yeah, I'm growing and developing in terms of looking after that. Think of looking at the work too, what the other challenges have been with the work. I think with my own critical self as well, she's popped up a little bit saying, you don't know what you're talking about, or no one wants to, I don't know, some of those just so it's the critical voice, but also the worry voice, the one that worries that, what if this doesn't work out? You don't have a plan B. Or the critic who sometimes just thinks that this maybe you're not the right fit for this, area, like you don't know enough. Or even sometimes, I think there's sometimes a little part of me that goes, oh, this is not really your interest area. Like just a lot of shit that the mind likes to pop up. And that what I tend to do there when the mind is challenging for me is slowing down and connecting with myself and what am I feeling right now? Because often my mind is going in that direction because there might be fear there. There might be a disconnection, like in terms of how I'm working, but just slowing down and actually connecting with myself and connecting with my values, and then revising and reviewing how I'm doing things and often, it's not the work itself. It might be a little bit on how I'm doing it. But what I've found is, and this is where my challenge is still, is my life outside of work and creating a life that I feel really connected to, that interests me, that are aligned with my values. So that life crafting, which is really important in preventing burnout and helping stay well, is still being crafted. So that can be a challenge as well, because I know that that's a key for me to continue growing my outside life, my actual work life. When my mind goes all worried, it's usually because I'm starting to make my whole life about work again. And that can be a challenge for me, because I can do that. I can get really latched on and interested in my work, or passionate about it, and lose sight of life itself. And so, yeah, just making sure that I'm crafting my life outside of work. And those things I mentioned before when I was talking about boundaries is really helpful there. Those routine things that I do that fill my life. My routine in the morning with going to gym and then going to coffee afterwards, the routine of after work with my family and going for those family walks. There's some traditions we've started, like on Fridays or Saturday nights, we play a Monopoly card game and have a couple of drinks with the dogs on the front porch. Catching up with friends, making those time for those things. And for me, it's a lot of connection that I enjoy, doing outside of my work, is connecting with people, with my loved ones. Anyway, I think that's about it that I want to share with the challenges. So I feel like I didn't have a last question, but I feel like another question is needed, kind of thing, to sort of wrap things up. And I suppose it's sort of like, where to from here, maybe, uh, you know, in life. It seems like a big question, but with my work, because at the moment with Burnout Psychology Support, it's a telehealth-based service, and I run individual sessions, but I also do group support sessions. I do, which is called the Wellness Support Space. I have workshops that I do. I have 2 coming up in April that are online for Australian residents. One's called Building Your Wellbeing at Work, and the other is Compassion for the Caregiver. So I've got that going on. I write monthly for Psychology Today in a blog called Lessons from a Burnt Out Psychologist. And of course, I do this podcast that's monthly, When Burnout Becomes Reality. And I continue to promote my book, Nothing Left to Give, doing some guest appearances on podcasts, or writing guest blogs, or even doing that research thing for the high school students, anything that can contribute to helping deal with this burnout and hopefully eradicating burnout in our society would be a lovely thing. But more than anything, everyone being able to stay connected to themselves and resourcing themselves to stay well in their lives. I think that's the most important thing. But, where to from here? I feel, well, I'm always being someone who's not very good in terms of future, but where to from here? Maybe you're hearing this first, is I really like to create more of a space, online space, but a space in which people can come and regularly access these resources, things like the wellness support space, the group burnout support group, the podcasts, the blogs, the workshops, but something that they can buy into as like sort of a subscription, and sort of they can use for as long as they need, but they have access to all those resources, almost like a membership in a way. That's something that I'd like to cultivate and bring. So then they have a space to go to heal, to grow, and to use to support them, but something that it might be more affordable than, and that they can use bits and pieces from, especially those who might not be in the privileged position to be able to afford individual therapy, which is, can be quite a costly venture. I know, I've been there. Yeah, but that's still doing the individual as well. But anyway, but I think outside of that, like, because I think from here, it's really focusing for me on my life crafting and building my life outside of work as well, and allowing work to be there, but not everything. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm, creating some space for there. Like my mind goes to creativity and art. Someone who did art a lot in school, but didn't take it on from there. So creating in that way, family time, friend time, and travel, hopefully, just allowing space to connect with what I need outside of work. I think is where I go from here. But yeah, I thank you for listening to my ramblings, and I hope that you got something from that you can take away, or maybe even some questions to help you reflect on with where things are at. What are the habits that are keeping you well? What are the challenges to keeping these habits, or what are the challenges you're facing at the moment that makes it hard to keep to those habits? Or maybe you notice you're still keeping to those habits of wellness that you've created, even though you're going through some challenges. And maybe that question, where to from here? What is going to be your focus? Or maybe it might even be, what are you taking away from this session what are you taking away from this episode that you're going to make space for, work on? Maybe it's something I mentioned about mindfulness or compassion and looking more into it. But yeah, I hope it's been helpful, and thank you so much for listening, and take care of you. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast. This pod relies on the power of its listeners to push it out to the four corners of the earth in hope that it reaches as many people in need as possible. So please like, share, follow, comment, or leave a review. Pay it forward, and I will be forever grateful. If you'd like to share your burnout to recover experience, or you are an expert working in the burnout field and would like to share your wisdom on the pod, please email me at shannonswales@burnoutspsychologysupport.com. To keep up to date with episode releases, please follow us on your favourite podcast provider, or by joining our mailing list at www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com. To check out the burnout psychology services on offer at Burnout Psychology Support, my telehealth practice, visit www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com/psychology services. Once again, thank you for listening, and please take care of yourself. Bye for now.